Okay, so this part of the class is the birds of alchemy. And I mentioned that the alchemical texts, this is one of the main ones, the Splendor Solis, there's the Rosarium Philosophium. There's a great one. It's not one of the ancient ones, but this is a great book by Nathan Schwartz-Salant. He writes a lot about alchemy and the different panels. This is a great book. It's A Secret of the Golden Flower. It's actually the book that started Jung on his alchemical journey. Carl Jung was writing, I believe it was the Red Book, and he stopped writing it and said, once I found alchemy, I realized that my psychology, his analytical psychology, Jungian psychology, was all alchemy. And he let go of that, and he went, that was his pivotal moment of, oh, this is my path. And he's like, alchemy answers everything. And it all started because one of his friends sent him this book and asked him to write a foreword to it. This is a great book. I would recommend starting with this one. If you're into symbols, it's a really great book. It's got a lot of the images from many of the different texts. So
Francis,
yes,
send us later on like the pictures of the books in the chat. Yeah,
absolutely.
because I can't see it too well.
No problem. And I just got this one. I just learned about this one. This one is, I want to say it's Arabic. And I'll send all the pictures in the chat, but I just got this one. And one of the things that you'll see in commonplace sort of universal thematic is the colors. Look at the colors: white, black, yellow, red. So a big thing in the images. Okay, this is symbol. The process of bringing things from the unconscious to the conscious, the bridge is symbolic, is mythologic. That's why we talk about symbol, we talk about imagery, we talk about archetypes, we talk about myths in every class, because that's the language of the psyche that brings it to the conscious mind. So if we just look at colors, the colors of the wheel, the colors on the knight's shirt, the colors in the books, the colors in all of these pictures, and I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to point out the colors of the birds, that's sort of the synopsis, is to show you that there is a process to all of this spiritual transformation. And if nothing else but the color shows you a stage. And so a few months back, somebody in the chat had asked about birds. And it got me thinking. And then when I was looking at the myth of this, I'm like, oh, this is a good space for it. And there's a lot of symbology in this particular part of the path, because we're moving from the unconscious to the conscious mind. In the North, we're now consciously making a choice. And so this is sort of a bridge as we enter the next direction. And I thought it was a great place to intersect the birds. So birds, from a symbolic perspective, because they have wings and they can take flight, is obviously linked to consciousness, right? And then the color will have to do with what stage of the alchemical process. So let's first start with a moment of just alchemy as a word. It's chemistry. And one of the things you'll see repeatedly, and I have a few images, are vessels, vases. You see in a lot of these ovens, this is like a brick oven. You see things on a flame. It's the idea of fire. It's the idea of transmutation. Fire is the element necessary in order for us to transmute a low consciousness thought into a high consciousness thought. The only element we're in control of. You can go back and look at all the information from Geese, which is the precursor to this class. So what is the chemistry? We're taking lead and we're making it into gold. Now, for the ignorant people of the day, they actually believe that they can take lead and make it into gold. And of course, who didn't want gold, right? So you'll read about alchemy in different ways. And that's like chemistry, physical alchemy in a lab, people trying to do the procedure, the science procedure. That is not what we're talking about. We're talking about spiritual alchemy, internal alchemy, taking our base nature, base metal, lead, heavy, dense, egoic thought, lightening it up, burning excess to a goal. Think of the sun, think of light, think of illumination, think of clarity, seeing, clear seeing, so that we are high consciousness beings. So if you get into alchemy and you go down that rabbit hole, just understand that various alchemies exist, and the ones we are talking about are spiritual alchemy, and we're talking about inner alchemy. Okay. So we're going to just use the process of birds and the colors and some alchemical image from these famous texts to kind of walk through the process so that you understand. And you'll see the coloring change depending on the alchemical process that we're in. Any questions about alchemy in general, birds in general, anything like that? We're going to go through crow, raven, peacock, swan, dove, pelican, phoenix, double-headed eagle. That's the process we're using. This is not universal in the sense. Different alchemies. At one point, I'm going to show you an image from Rosicrucian alchemy. You can see Arabic alchemy, different alchemies throughout the traditions. We'll use different animals. So this is just kind of the more Rosicrucian sort of alchemical order. So it's not like this is the only thing, okay? But this is the one that we're using. So we're going to start with the crow or the raven, which is the same. I have peacock and swan in parentheses because they're not full alchemical processes. They're parts of, they're on the way to becoming the dove. And if you see, you've got the crow, the peacock, the swan, and the dove. 4. The number 4. Numbers are obviously linked to spiritual thematics and so forth. So we're talking about 4 is a number of stabilization. And we can stay there. Doesn't mean it's the end. Okay? Then we're going into pelican, phoenix, and the double-headed eagle. Now we're going into the number 3. 4 plus 3 is 7. 7 is obviously round and round, repeated in spiritual philosophy every which way we look. So even in this. But the peacock swan is on the way to becoming the dove. So even though I'm going to speak to it, it's not going to have its own stage of the 4 main stages of alchemy. The 4 main stages of alchemy are black, nigredo. You might have heard of the dark night of the soul. Albedo, white. Think of albino. Citrinitas, yellow. We often think of that as the sun. And rubedo, the red. So why birds? Different birds are the sheaths and auras of states of consciousness we pass through. So as our thoughts and perspective shift and we gain flight, if you will, lightness, levity in the thought, in the egoic structure that's so metal heavy, and we lighten ourselves from these higher states of consciousness, the birds represent being in flight, moving higher and higher and higher. When we entered the direction of the east, we started going in an upward staircase spiral. We saw winged animals. The journeys are now in the higher states and higher planes of consciousness. This all correlates to that. So birds represent by their color and the ones that we're going to go through the alchemical process. So this is a famous alchemical image, and you see the frog chained to the eagle. This represents our base nature. We learned early on in the West, you cannot change the direction of the West. You cannot change being human. You cannot change your self-sabotage and your selfish tendencies and all of that. That exists. What we do is we transmute that. You cannot change your childhood and the traumas and the triggers, and that's why the wound can't fully close, but you can transmute that. And so the base nature of the frog, part of the alchemical process, if not the beginning part of the process, is to recognize that our spirituality is linked to something material earthbound and gross. It's ugly, it's warded, it's distorted. It's a creature of the night, whatever you want to consider. And for those who love animals and frogs, pick another animal. Doesn't matter. It's metaphor. Okay? So we have to face up to the excrement of ourselves. And it's not detached. The ego doesn't gain perspective because it's free to go. There's no freedom with the chain. It's an acceptance that these are the aspects of our nature. And when we accept the excrement, the slimy, the bumpy, the warts and all, then we can raise consciousness. The other reason that this imagery is important, in alchemy, it's images that speak to the unconscious and come to the conscious. These are called plates. In all of these books, you're going to see a plate numbered. In the Splendor Solas, which is the main one we're using, those are numbered plates. They go in order because they're telling a story of our process. Again, it's not necessarily linear, but there's a flow. Even though we might go back, like the song says, and forward in that divine time, and the dance, there is a flow as we move into this rhythm. And gaining perspective, getting closer to the light, getting closer to the heavens. That is the essence of the transcendence. It's not leaving the body. It's not that there is something beyond the earthly realm that we want to, get out of the body to attain. It's here. The image shows it. It's here, but it's going beyond that nature so that we can have a different perspective. Yes. And it's the black magic because it's taking of our lower nature, our almost like the darkness that's hidden, and it starts to evolve so that hiddenness can be seen to the light, and that inner authority can kind of be shown to all. And every culture has a version of alchemy, Haley. So the Egyptian, the Arabic, the Chinese, you're going to see that, but there is a similarity throughout. There is a universality to the process. So to go towards the light, you must penetrate the substance and gross to come to the level of purification, the ego, the selfishness, the base nature, the deadly sins, the desires, the impure thoughts, the overdramatic emotion. We've said it 100 ways. Whatever that substance is for you, that wounding, that trigger, that selfishness, that must be penetrated. It's not going to come easy. If the first stage is a nigredo, and we're calling it the dark night of the soul, the thought of thinking that this is going to be an easy breezy thing is a little naive. Right? And that's why those early steps is like gathering information and buying tarot cards and have fun. But if we stay there, then we stay in A-level influence, and that's okay too. But let's get honest with the process. And the process is from nigredo to rubedo. That's the color coding, if you will. So we start with the crow or the raven, and that is the symbol primarily for the nigredo. You see here a skeleton with the crow. If you start doing research, and I'm not going to go through those stages because there's so many variants. I use a 7-stage, and we have a $33 program at Hidden Truths on the alchemy as a spiritual path. I take the 4 that we're going to cover, and then I use the 7 stages. If you Google Wikipedia, you're going to see 7, you're going to see 11, you're going to see many. One of those subsections is putrefacto. And so this is why it says putrefacto here. And the crow is relevant. And so there is a necessary death process. So going into beaver, we go back into falcon, and we go out into beaver, and we go back into falcon. This death process is constant and continuous. So this isn't something that is one and done. Usually the biggie, the one that cracks you open, the one that you say, oh my God, this was the thing that turned me upside down and I lost all orientation, hence the purpose of the dances. that's usually when we say my journey started. I woke up. But the death process continues. This is typically totems 1 through 8. I'm just putting that to our 12 totems. So 8 stages before we get anywhere out of the dark night, out of 12. I mean, just look at the proportion. This is a consistent and constant evolution that we're in. The way that this phase is oftentimes experienced is that we feel that we're alone, we're in a cave, no one understands us, we withdraw, we meet our shadow, we have a breakthrough. These are some of the words that we use when we're in this phase of the Nigredo, right? We realize, wow, I have such crappy thoughts, feelings, it's my will or nobody. I recognize my lower impulses, it's all about me. We really start to get into this phase of recognizing that what we've been seeing ourselves as good oftentimes, and for some it's evil, right? It can go either way, isn't really the way that we are. There's an element here of withdrawal. I mentioned in the class about the separation. There is a need at a phase in the journey that we must withdraw, not because we're special, but because we need space to see things a little clearer, gain a little perspective, get away from the family, get away from the job, get away from whatever it is that has us so like claustrophobic about how we think that is the only way that we can navigate the world. And so this particular image, the man is in a bubble and the crow is sitting on his belly. But now look at him. He's gained perspective of the stars, the sun, the planets. He's saying, oh, wait, I am part of a larger system. I am part of a macrocosm. We'll visit that in a later stage. But we need a separation so that we can identify that we are not it. We are not God. We are part of something more collective and larger. And it's not our will be done. Here you start seeing the vases. The vases are very, very alchemical in process. They're called vases, they're called vessels. A very popular word these days is container. You know, people will say, oh, I'll hold the space for you and I'll be a container, or the therapeutic relationship or room is a container. This is an alchemical word. Not only is the container and vessel related to the body and the divine feminine, think of the womb. If you do not have a container, you cannot do alchemy. Where are you going to put, if we just go back to physical alchemy, where are you going to put all your chemistry? Where are you going to mix your potions? And so this confirms that we must be fully embodied in this process. This dissociation, this spiritual bypassing, this I float and my feet are not on the ground and on inner authority does not work in this process. And if you start off in this process dissociated, as I did, you will surely get embodied. It will force you into the body. There is no alchemy without a container, without a vessel. This is it. The larger earth, the larger womb of Mother Earth, the larger, lay your body down, as the song said, Mother Earth will swallow you, is the larger metaphor for the one that you come from, mom's womb, and the one that is yourself, which is the full embodiment process. So this is a game changer in spiritual parlance, because for people that think that God is out there, that the authority is out there, whether it's on a throne, whether it's on another plane, whether it's in angels and whatever it is you believe in over there, this shows you not true. It is here. You are the vessel. This is internal magic. And it happens in here. And so you see the vessel repeated and the oven repeated over and over. It is an absolute archetype that we find. Thanks, Jen. that we find in alchemy. So now we're entering into 2, the peacock. Again, this is not a full stage. We're not in albedo. We're now moving from the black of the nigredo into the white of the albedo, and there's this peacock stage. Think of the colors of the peacock, blues. Okay, so now we're starting to think clearer. Now we're starting to realize, wait a minute, there isn't just an earthly 1% world, going back to that tree of life of the Kabbalah. There's a 99% ethereal existence. A lot of people like to stay here. Oh, everything's energy, everything's energy, everything's energy. Yeah, everything's energy. But guess what? Without a form, without a vessel, what's that energy doing for you? This was a few weeks back, a few months back, when I said, what is the image? What is the imago Dei? What is your Ishvadevatar? You need a relationship with something divine that has form. That is why we have an altar. If it's Jesus, if it's Buddha, if it's Hanuman, pick your poison. Hell, it can be a tree. It does not matter. We need a form so that we can understand that this is happening here. And so a lot of people get into the etheric, and it's great. This is the next stage. Obviously, there's something beyond just the earthly body, but we can't stay there to fully become the philosopher's stone. So here we start to understand symbols, energy, the ether. The eyes on the peacock give you, I like to look at it like a twister board. I'm here. What's my view from here? What's my view from here? What's my view from here? So take your God. I'll pick on Alize for a minute. If your God is freedom, what does freedom look like over here? What does it look like over here? What if you tried freedom on like this with a relationship? What if you try it over here living in another country? And you try it on for size. Now life becomes your lab. Now you're living and practicing and trying all of it on for size. This is all to prepare you for the universality of the human experience. Because how can you judge someone if you haven't walked in their shoes? And so the peacock symbol shows you how these are just forms and masks, and it's all transient until you find which one is you're certain that you want to show up as. But you got to try some masks and some eyes on for size so that you can expand out of what you think is the only way that things should be. Blue is a big color here. So I share this with you in terms of black. If there's a lot of black in your dreams, if there's a black in your symbolism, even if it's just in other things that aren't birds, look at the color movement, because there's a flow there to, I'm glad that helps. Because you're not attached to anything. So if freedom's the God and you get to try on all these different versions, it's great. It feels like, oh, this is so freeing. I can play with this, play dress up for a few months and figure it out, right? So now we're expanding out of just the material. There's other ways of viewing the world, but it's blue. We're not fully into a purified albedo state, but we're moving in that direction. Think of blue, black and blue, right? Like when you get a bruise and it starts to like soften up a bit, it gets a little bluer than blacker, and you feel like it's almost like making itself softer on your skin. It doesn't hurt as much. So the experience of the peacock and the blueness of it is lighter. Next is swan. So we saw the swan with the geese in Truth 5. And the swan represents inspiration. And now we're really getting into like, oh, wow, everything is connected. There's a cosmos and sacred geometry and astrology and symbols. And this is where people get really, really excited. But we're still not in the albedo. It's a refinement process, but you're still in that first nigredo stage. And this is very important. Teresa of Avila, for those of you who read The Interior Castle, speaks to that as the first 3 stages. It's the same thing, reiterated in many different philosophies. So you start with, oh my God, life isn't the way I saw it. Dark night of the soul, depression, despair, all of that. Then I soften up. I say, oh, wow, let me look with this ether and spirit world's all about, and there's energy, and let me go study energy medicine. And then you open up to, oh my God, there's astrology and there's sacred geometry, and the world starts opening up to you. But that is all step one. We have not even entered the second step of the albedo, so that we can put this into relationship. Now we're in the dove. Now we're in the albedo. That is the white when I showed you on the knight's shirt, and when I showed you on the shaman. So we have to go through all of that to even begin to get to the true self. So the dove has oftentimes been associated with the Christ consciousness, with the true self, with Christianity. In Noah's Ark, there's a dove that goes and lets Noah know, okay, and Noah represents a purification, the deluge myths of the water. We have to dissolve something in this water. There has to be something that's flooded so that we can cleanse and purify. This is intended in that myth. And all deluge myths are linked to this. And at the end is the dove says, okay, you're good to go. And that myth of Noah's Ark, which actually comes from Utnapishtim in the Babylonian tradition, that was the origin of that myth, is that the bad, so to speak, the bad people, right? What emerged was the good family that was left, Noah and the family. It's talking about the true self. Now that inner authority is starting. Now I'm beginning to understand that there is something beyond my ego, and my soul is taking the lead, okay? And so it's represented oftentimes as the Holy Spirit. In this particular alchemical panel, we see the dove here. The guy is in the bath. The bath is called, one of the stages of alchemy is dissolution. So it's like a dissolving of, a cleansing, a dirt dissolution, right? So everything's happening as chemistry if you're thinking symbolically. Now we're talking totems 5 and 6. We're talking individuation and values. What's my road? I have to create that road. And with that road, I have to put in the parameters and the definitions and the values in which I'm going to start creating, because I dissolved all of the old structure. And now I'm starting my new structure. That's the second stage. Again, this is where people stay on the path, or this is where they veer off, or this is what they say it's enough. And that's okay. Yes, these are from the Splendor Solace. There might be later on some from the Rosarium Philosophium. But these, anything that looks like this, Haley, is from the Splendor Solace. And my version is this version. There's various versions. There's a Harvey Splendor Solace that's similar, and it's really lovely as well. But this one's available pretty readily. Now we're in the Pelican. So now we're entering the Citrinitas. This is the yellow, okay? So this is like the light, the sun, the illumination. Think of yellow as the sun coming out, daylight again, right? That was the intention with partially with that song, and it's linked to Totem 9. Now you start to realize microcosm, macrocosm. I'm part of, in this relational field, all things are allowed. One of the things that Jung brought was this concept of synchronicity, which basically is the law of correspondence in spiritual parlance. And in the therapeutic container, right, because it's alchemy, what happens? What the therapist brings up belongs to the client. What the client brings up belongs to the therapist, right? We talk about this. This is how we live in this realm. And so it was Jung's understanding of alchemy that started to form a lot of his philosophy and his psychology, because he started realizing. So at this stage, we realize there is no difference between the inner and the outer. Their projection is your projection. That judgment is your judgment. That is this. It's all one. There is no separation. We create the separation. And so this is really where we understand there's no shortcut. By shortcut, I mean, if you go to an energy healer, if you do your sound healing, all those things are great and fun. And we're going to talk a lot about chanting and sound healing stuff next month. But if we get stuck in, oh, energy medicine or, oh, astrology, right? We're still in that separation state. In the Enneagram, I'm a number 4. I'm a Pisces. Like, we're still in sectioning ourselves off rather than being whole. This is where the wholeness begins. All of it. I'm all of it. The good, the bad, the ugly. Everything is one. So it's really, the pelican has to do with the class from tonight. And we have to go into this dance over and over and over and over until we go up, 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 through all of the chakras, through all of the sins, through all of the levels of consciousness in place of the universe. Here I have is the 7 bodies, however you see that, 7 main planets, 7 chakras, whatever your parlance is. And now you realize the relationship of the part to the whole. So this is from the Rosicrucian alchemy, and you see here the cross. This is where this comes from, the pelican. So again, like I said before, all of this isn't like every animal in every alchemy. It's specific. And what do you see here? In both of these images, you see the larger, the macrocosm, and the microcosm, and you see blood. You have to pierce through all of those veils. You have to understand you're pecking and pecking and pecking at yourself, and kind of almost removing the feathers and going through the layers and the layers and the layers and the layers. So those early 3 chakras, those base chakras, are very obviously animal, right? The frog image. They're about the selfish desires. In the 4th, now we're starting to see this relationality of agape love, or love the other, and maybe some service. Here we speak the will, but it's the will of God, right? And then here we understand all things unified. So as we go through the heavenly bodies, the chakras, the planes, the main 7 planets, your language, you're piercing and piercing and piercing veils, so you can really see how you're just a part to all of it. Thanks, Monique. Then we are in the Phoenix. And the concept of the Phoenix is, notice how the Phoenix sets himself on fire. Now the process isn't that the universe threw you into that dark night of the soul. The universe, or the God, or the creator, or your boyfriend, or your parent threw you to the wolves. Now you're setting yourself on fire. You understand that all of things that are not true self must burn away, and you have to die to become whole over and over. And it just becomes part of your process. It's just part of it. It's just part of your dance and how you live in the world, because you know that there's no separation. And so dying and becoming, and dying and becoming, and the death and the rebirth. And so the Phoenix is constantly dying over and over again, because it understands that there isn't any difference. And here you learn to love everything, fully everything. This is like what Rumi, if you have read Rumi poetry, Rumi's poetry is just love letters to God. And he talks about the beloved. You hear Teresa of Avila talking about the beloved, the marriage, like this union of the two, of the opposites, of the outer and the inner. There is no distinction, and you keep burning. Anytime a distinction shows up, you keep burning and burning and burning, because you know that there's nothing. There's no true separation. That's true love of the cosmos, if you will. And that's the 6th stage. And the final stage, now we're in the red, now we're in the rubedo. So this is still part of the citrinitas, the pelican and the phoenix. So even with all of that, we're just still in the citrinitas. That's truth 9. You haven't even entered what we're starting the north next month. The north starts the rubedo. So now we have the double-headed eagle. This is the last steps. This is what we call the magnum opus. It's becoming here, this philosopher's stone, led to gold. And it's exactly what that book, Haley, is about, of dethroning sacred spaces. The archetype that I use in that book is Saturn. It's the narrow door. We're going to talk about the narrow door next month. that we go through the narrow door every day, every day. We get to the door, we make a choice, we're going to do our practice, we're going to have our reverence, we're going to show up with grace, we know we're going to screw up, we're going to go through the door. The next day we do it again and again and again and again. And that builds your practice of contemplation and prayer and chanting and sound healing or whatever it is that you do. That practice day in and day out, that's the refinement. And the reason that it's the double-headed is that it is the union of opposites. That opposition of, I need to be free, therefore a relationship structures me. I need to be validated at work, therefore I can't take a day off. Whatever your opposition is, I have to be neglected and alone, therefore I can't find a lover or friends. Whatever your 0 to 100 is, here is what we call the conjunctio. So when I showed you that lemniscat earlier of the Mars and the Venus, you separate, you come back conjunct. You leave, you come back. You die, you come back and serve. That dance is that final step. This is what a lot of spiritual teachers call the diamond. I talk about the diamond in that book. Teresa talks about the diamond. Richard Rohr talks about the immortal diamond. These words are used in penetrating through various philosophies because they speak to the essence. That is where there's nothing left but the diamond of the soul that we all. That's the concept of namaste. I see your light, you see mine. All I see is your diamond, and I'm that same thing. And so now we can live in spiritual and material because we realize that there is no distinction. Truly, there is no separation. And so anything that is twofold, anything that is opposite in nature has been unified. And where is it unified? In the heart, which is love, ultimate. That's why traditions end in love is the answer. Forget everything you knew and just love. But you can't start there. That's altruism is fake. That love at your neighbor, if you haven't done the Negredo, is all fake. That's why we have to pull back the veils to say that's not genuine. You're just trying to not be your parents, or you're trying to not be a jerk, or you're not trying to have people figure out who you are. It has to go, even though it's not stages, it is a process of stages. And this is what we're going to start next month with totems 10 through 12. Any questions on anything we covered tonight before we close Sacred Space? No? Okay.
Just to think a lot, I guess. Review it.
And that's hopefully what these classes do, right? It gives us a month to contemplate and journal and think and hone in on the specific teaching for the month, right? So this is the teaching of the month. It doesn't mean that the other ones don't creep in, but that's how we start to go through this circular process. Every time I teach it, I'm refining this particular teaching for myself, for what shows up. And then we work on the next, and then we work on the next. But at least now we have an organizational structure. In the chat last week, Haley asked a question about her 612. Part of the problem with the 12th house, it's not only the 12th, but the 12th primarily because it has no boundaries. The 12th house has no boundaries. And so, and I see this a lot with students that study with me privately, is that they get stuck in that A influence type of student where it's the book du jour, the teacher du jour, the retreat du jour. They don't have an organizational structure. And so one of the comments I said to Haley was, get organized. Pick anyone. You want to do this, astrology, Enneagram, shaman, it does not matter. Pick a structure that you can get organized. So this affords you a 12-step structure to go, oh, this I categorize at this. This is what's showing up this month in my life to work on. And maybe you're not going to work on Beaver this month. The ideal is that we all work together progressively on each stage. But if you're still at Bear, then you work on Bear and you work on your thoughts and everything that comes in. And it starts to give you organization to say, oh, there's a flow. Because this can be very chaotic. This can be very disconcerting, especially without a teacher, without some consistent guidance. especially when you open up to the planes of the universe and the ether and the energy, and things are just coming at you, and you have dreams and you see symbols. And I mean, I wake up every day to no less than 5 to 10 texts of Francis this, Francis this. We need to start with some organizing structure. And that's the point of any tradition, is to give you at least some structure to where it all fits. So if that's what you got from that, Alize, and now it gives you something to think about, hopefully it gives you a honing in on what you're going to think about, so that it doesn't seem so overwhelming, because this can be very, very overwhelming when things are coming at you from every corner. And when we open ourselves up to these teachings, it comes from every direction. You just can't unsee it, right? That's part of the process from the peacock. It comes from all places. And how do I organize? So it doesn't matter what structure you use, you can eventually layer all of them on top of the one you pick, but get organized in how you're going to look at your thoughts, feel your feelings, work your dark night, organize your selfish, sentiments. Get some structure. And if there's nothing that resonates, make it up. Create your own. We're in teacher land this month. Any other questions or comments? Does anyone want to close up the space? No? Okay. So before we close up, my whirling dervish is winking. One of the things I highly recommend is just this month, try, if you have whatever practice you have, whatever reverence practice you have, even if it's just lighting a holy stick or incense, or if you pray in the mornings, or if you do yoga, whatever it is, it's once a week, every day, it doesn't matter. When you're in that space that you're like, oh, this is my centering space, this is my space of spiritual reverence and practice, try to do something out of the typical form that you do. When I told you that the client this morning said, oh my God, it was so weird, or you're not going to believe this, or this is so strange, right? That's the ego structure. That's her language. This is weird, meaning this doesn't fit into my egoic view of how I see the world. Well, we do the same thing with gestures. You wear a ring, put it on a different thing. You get the same nail color, get a different nail color. You sit at one chair in the table, sit at another. That's another thing I talk about in the recorded content. But in addition to that, move your body different. Part of the sacred dances of Gurdjieff and the whirling dervishes is not only do they eventually, after spinning so much, connect to that divine flow, because they're in the soul, they're in the circle, they're not in the hierarchy of the ego, they're in the circle. That if you spin, and you feel disoriented, something might enter. So I'll just pick on Alize for a minute. Twirl, opposite directions that make you dizzy. And before you do that, set the intention. Show me what I can do to have freedom in a relationship. And you might get that hit of the divine inspiration as you're getting out of the egoic structure of how you typically move. If you sit a certain way, sit differently. Put your shoes, even if it's 5 minutes, on the wrong feet. Do something in the body so that it starts to change the egoic structure and put you into that peacock of seeing things differently. That simple practice. I walk on the beach in the mornings. This week I've been going opposite. Where I normally go this way on the beach, I've been going on the boardwalk and walking backwards. So different gestures that make us get out of our structure can bring in different ways of viewing the world. And these are small adjustments, but they start to allow that divine flow of energy, of information, of intuition, and the inner authority to get strong. So thank you, Gurdjieff. Thank you, Spensky. Thank you for the Sufi wisdom, Rumi. Thank you. Thank you, the West, for your Negredo, for showing us the darkness in ourselves. Thank you, the South, for the Albedo, to show us the separation between our inner wisdom and our ego mind. Thank you in the East for the Citrinitas, where daylight again begins to emerge when we start to meld with all that is and all is being in a relational field where no separation exists. And thank you, the North. I'm so looking forward to joy and equanimity and contentment and peace and grace. And the rubedo stage and the reverence and the ability to use my vessel for day in and day out practice to serve. Mother Earth, that reminds us that we all need a container. Life is here and life is now. Father Sky, that reminds us with the sun and the moon and the stars that we are part of a larger macrocosm. And just as you have order, we have order within. And the Creator, thank you for the interconnectedness of this all, no matter where we are, the shared human experience. Blood is blood from whatever cut, whatever body, whatever color of skin, whatever religious or political affiliation. Use us all for service. Allow us to all gain an inner authority where we can have recognition of our vibration, no matter how few or how many surround us, that we can be recognized by our fruits. Thank you. Aho. Thank you all. And I'll see you in a few weeks for Deer.
Thank you, Francis.
Thank you. You have a nice night.
Thank you.